control. Procurement, a process responsible for monitoring and controlling procurement work. This is a process which helps us in managing relationship with our vendors or suppliers. So let's look at the input and output and tools and technique to understand how we execute this particular process. Now, till now, we have selected the vendor. We have already identified the procurement work and we have awarded that particular work to the vendor. So when we want to monitor or control the procurement work, we need to know what was the plan. So what we have done, first we identified procurement statement of work. Then we did a process of selecting seller. And then we got into an agreement. So this we did in our plan procurement and conduct procurement process. These particular activities has given us project management plan, because the procurement management plan is a subsidiary plan of project management plan. So we get project management plan along with the procurement information. We got procurement documents like request for proposal, request for bid. All these documents may involve some legal information which would be required while we are controlling the procurement. We got an agreement. Agreement could be a contract or a understanding or some kind of legal framework which says that buyer is responsible for performing X amount of work and the seller is responsible for performing Y amount of work. So we get agreement from these processes. What else? While performing, since the control procurement is an iterative process, while executing the control procurement, we may have agreed on changing some of the terms, some of the processes. So we also need to look into approved change request, because we started with a plan and while executing that plan, we may have some approved deviations or some approved preventive or corrective actions. So we need to look into account approved change requests. So these inputs tells us what is needed. In these inputs tells us what is planned. Now we need to look into what is getting done. The input which is coming from execution and monitoring processes. So we need to look into a process which can give us an execution and monitoring informations. Now we should remember that buyer and seller are executing the procurement work in collaboration, and their processes are getting interacted during this particular execution. For example, the buyer may be doing quality control on the deliverables which are supplied by sellers. The buyer is also performing, buyer means you, also performing risk control. So you are maybe controlling risks. So you are doing control risks to ensure that risks are mitigated and managed as planned. You, buyer, may be also performing integrated change control to ensure that whatever changes which we are doing in our procurement process or in our specification which we are getting from the seller are integrated with the overall project vision. So these are the few. You may also be controlling cost on the basis of the information or the status details provided by the sellers. especially if you are dealing in cost reimbursable or time and material projects or type of contracts. The cost control becomes a crucial activity for you. If it's a fixed price, you may not be that much worried about controlling costs. So the point I'm trying to make it that while doing the execution of a procurement work, your processes, all the remaining processes of your PMBOKs are actively involved along with the procurement work. Or as an output of it, you get work performance data, which is telling you what is getting done, what is pending. So the information which is coming from direct and managed project work. You also need to look into work performance report. This report is primarily coming from the seller. Seller is telling about how he has performed his work. Maybe the report pointing out the technical specification of the work which he has done. Maybe the report is more focused towards the project management related performances. So while these inputs, we got the information about the planning, the plan which we made for our procurement work, and the current status. What is getting done and what are the variances and where the performance is as far as seller is concerned. Now, after getting this input, while performing or controlling the procurement, you need to look into 4 dimensions. These dimensions are managing adherence to process. So, first dimension could be adherence to quality. Now, this particular dimension has 2 areas. One is the procurement work is adhering to the process which you have agreed while in an agreement. So you need to check the process adherence. You also need to check product adherence. The specification which you have agreed in your agreement and further procurement statement of work initially is the vendor giving you the outputs as per those specifications. So you need to ensure this. The second dimension is you need to ensure the change management. Now, while executing the procurement contract, you may find various events where you find that you need to modify or extend the agreement. So those issues also need to be managed while executing controlled procurement. The other dimension is administration. Now, the administration is, we can say, the admin related dimension where the vendor is coming up with some claims. Vendor is requesting for some payments because he has done with a particular milestone and he's asking for the release of a payment or submitting some claims. The fourth dimension is performance review. Now, this particular dimension talks about how well we are doing against our plan. So now if you look at tools and techniques which are given in PMBOK, we can map them in 4 dimensions. The first, I want to talk about inspection and audit. So we do inspection and audit to ensure that vendor is adhering to process and product quality guidelines. So for that, we apply inspection and audit. We may select part of the deliverables. How are we going to perform inspection and audit? We have mentioned that in our agreement as well as in procurement management plan. Final agreement along with you and vendor is listed in agreement. Change management. In this, we need to look into contract change control system. Like Now the contract change control systems tells us a system of changing contract. If you want to change the contract, this is the system you need to follow. The admin dimension is simple. You need to handle administration of claims. So claims administration, and you need to do payments. So payment systems. So you need to have a process which takes care of the claims reported by the vendors. You may want to verify them before releasing the payment, and you need to have a system which takes care of vendors' request for the payment. Performance review. So you need to have a performance reporting as a tool and technique. Now performance reporting is all about reporting or analyzing the performance against plan. This is the tool which gives us work performance information as an output which is coming from this particular process. It tells us where do we stand as far as our procurement work is concerned. We also have one more performance review tool and technique which is more about procurement process review. This particular tool is all about reviewing the effectiveness of a procurement process. So how well our procurement process is performing is getting reviewed in a procurement process reviewed. On the top of these tools and techniques, we also need a record management system. Now since the procurement is a very legal thing, the claims, payments, the documents, the changes documents, the quality audit reports, all these need to be recorded well, and so we need a system which is a part of project management information system, and we name it here record management system. This provides the backbone to execute this particular work. So these are the tools and techniques for our control procurements process. Now, what it generates? As usual, it's a monitoring and controlling process group process. So it should be generating at least two outputs. One is work performance information, because it is monitoring and controlling a plan versus the execution, and change requests, because while doing this controlling, this process may identify something which needs to be changed. So this process also generates two output. One is work performance information. You can visualize this as a plan versus execution status. It can tell that where the procurement variances are. At a given point of time, what was expected and what has been done related to the procurement. The second output which comes from this process is change request. You may want to recommend a new dimension to a product which you have agreed initially. So this will go through a change request. You may want to change the process of managing claims and payment. That also goes through this particular change request. And then we may do few updates. What all we can update here? Whenever we have an update, we usually update what? We update project management plan, project documents, and sometimes organization process assets as well. So here also we will update project management plan for the changes, for the learning which we have done. We want to change the procurement management plan which will get updated through project management plan. We may update project documents. Since we are doing good amount of learning, good amount of documentation work in this process, the project documents may get updated. And third, organization process assets. They may get also updated on the basis of the change control learning, the inspection and audit learning, we may recommend going forward whenever we do a procurement contract for this particular area, we also need to conduct a given inspection. So those kind of recommendation, those kind of learning can go here. We also need to update the output of procurement process review, because a vendor, the history of vendor should be shared across the organization. So you want to share about the performance of this vendor so the other projects can also learn from it. So in summary, a controlled procurement, a process which helps us in monitoring and controlling the execution of procurement work.